Unless you guys were living under a rock last season or just not playing the game, then you know that Arc 3.0 was broken on Titans. Broken meaning that you could just run Storm Grenades with Touch of Thunder, Spark of Magnitude, and Spark of Shock, and then combine all that with Heart of Inmost Light and deal wild amounts of damage just by spamming abilities. Because of how strong this was last season, Bungie put out a nerf for Storm Grenades that reduced their total duration, which in turn reduced their damage. Storm Grenades do still feel super strong, but I want to see exactly how strong they are now, so in this video I'm going to be testing them and the damage they deal, and then comparing it to Pulse Grenades. I also wanted to try and get a realistic damage value so that they could be compared to other top options in the game, in which you're going to see that sometimes Pulse Grenades are actually way stronger than Storm Nades, and other times they aren't. As always, if you guys do enjoy these testing videos, we are super close to 50k, so a like and sub helps me out a ton, and also make sure to let me know what you want to see tested next. Just highlighting the nerf really quickly, Storm Grenades received nerfs to both the duration provided from Touch of Thunder and Spark of Magnitude. Touch of Thunder reduced the roaming time of the Storm Grenade by 1 full second, and Spark of Magnitude reduced this by half a second. So the duration of a Storm Grenade went from 7 seconds down to just 5.5 in total. Starting with Storm Grenades first, just looking at the damage that a single grenade does, I am testing over on the Ogre in Grasp. This isn't where I normally test, so I will not be comparing these numbers to anything other than Pulse Grenades for this video, but you are going to see that a single grenade hits for almost exactly 150,000 damage. Then switching over to Pulse Grenades, testing in the exact same way, making sure each pulse hits the Ogre as it stands still. We now hit for 100,000 damage, meaning Storm Grenades hit around 50% harder if you just compare them 1-to-1. I did also test using multiple Pulse Grenades at once, and you can see here, even by throwing 2 grenades at the same time, both are going to count for damage. At the end here, I hit for 195,000, which is super close to 200,000, which we would expect if both are dealing damage. I've heard some people saying that multiple Pulse Nades at once don't stack damage-wise, so I wanted to make sure that they actually did, and I also did make sure to test with multiple people using grenades at the same time too. This allowed for us to both use nades to deal damage. I hit for 100k as usual and as we'd expect, and then Ice hit slightly less, but was more or less just a grenade placement issue, if I had to guess. The reason that all of this matters is because even though Storm Grenades still deal more damage, you're able to throw Pulse Grenades way more frequently. The reason for this is because as Pulse Grenades deal damage, they release Ionic Traces, which give us ability energy back, making the cycle for grenade spam much quicker, allowing us to get off more grenades. I took this against Callie because she stands still during the damage phase and tested both Storm Grenades and Pulse Grenades with the full Hoyle build setup. Starting with Storm Grenades first, we were able to get off 4 grenades here, and the last one didn't do its full amount of damage either. And then looking over at Pulse Grenades, these came back way quicker as we would expect because we're getting a bunch of energy from Ionic Traces. So in total, we threw 6 of these and we almost got our 7th one back as well. I think the important distinction between these two tests is that after you are out of charge with light stacks, Storm Grenades start to fall off much harder, whereas Pulse Grenades tend to have much more consistent regen. In the same amount of time, we got off 2 extra Pulse Grenades, which made the damage we dealt extremely similar. Storm Grenades deal 50% more damage, but we managed to throw 50% more Pulse Grenades, so I would say during longer damage phases, Pulse Grenades actually seem somewhat favorable, assuming that the boss you're fighting stands relatively still. Hopping over into this lost sector to then get some damage values from the grenades against the boss is where things started to get weird. First and foremost, with grenades, especially those that scale in damage and then also hit multiple times, you tend to get slightly different damage numbers each time you throw a grenade, especially for Storm Grenades. For this testing, I ended up counting up each damage number that hit to determine the exact total amount of damage that each grenade dealt, and I also tested without Spark of Shock because adding in the jolt numbers would cause for some inconsistencies when testing here. Looking at the Storm Grenade first, this hit the boss 16 total times. I added the numbers up from this grenade throw, which was one of the better tests I got, showing all the damage numbers. In total, this ended up hitting for 107.7 thousand damage. Then comparing this to a Pulse Grenade, this is going to release 8 pulses, each of which should scale up in damage, with the 4 final pulses all hitting for the max damage output that it reaches, which should be a 100% increase. On top of this, there is also a smaller damage number that gets applied 6 times, and I think this smaller additional damage only applies if your grenade hits an enemy and also the ground. So in total, testing against this boss, if you count the immune I hit for as well, this would be 122.9 thousand damage, which is decently higher than a single Storm Grenade. Because I tested and things seemed super inconsistent, I went back and tested everything again and got more or less the exact same results. A second storm grenade hit for almost the exact same values, with only 13 lightning strikes hitting, so that was just a different distribution per strike. And then a pulse grenade hit for almost the exact same values as well, minus the ground pulses because it was in the air. The biggest issue I see here is that when testing against different bosses, storm grenades dealt upwards of 50% more damage, which we saw consistently against the Ogre and even with values on Kali. Then during this testing, not only did storm grenades not deal around 50% more damage per grenade like expected, but they were actually way worse than pulse nades. I didn't want to calculate DPS values because things still feel super inconsistent to me, and I didn't want to say one is better than the other and spread any misinformation, but I imagine this comes down to an issue where different abilities might be dealing different damage against different boss types, which then becomes very hard to get consistent testing for. I think the simple TLDR for this video is that no matter where you use pulse grenades, they seem to actually compete really well against storm nades, and I would also argue they are better against bosses that stand still with longer damage phases. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about which grenade you like better if you've tried them both out. My goal for the video wasn't to show one being better than the other, but rather just compare the two. We are also in the process of learning Deep Stone Crypt speedruns over on my Twitch. A link to that and my Discord are both in the description below if you want to check those out. Anyways, that's all for this video, guys. As always, have a good one. Peace.